Right after gaining the power of the Creator, I found out I had terminal cancer. To save my life, I turned the orchard in my hometown into a sandbox world. I experimented with accelerating the evolutionary process, hoping to create a civilization capable of curing cancer. Countless tiny humans lived inside this sandbox. One day, they were terrified to discover that this world had a round sky and a square earth, and there were even colossal giants tens of thousands of feet tall. Whenever a civilization didn't develop as I expected, I would wipe everything out and start over. I would give the hero of each civilization a chance to ask me a question. Whenever they asked how many days it took me to create the world, I would recall the time I spent digging dirt to build the sandbox. I created this land in exactly 7 days. And so, the legend of the God who created all things in 7 days spread far and wide across this land. Civilization after civilization rose and fell in my sandbox. But who could have imagined that all those glorious civilizations originated from a single spore? Back then, in the 100-acre sandbox in the orchard, I dug out an artificial pond. Then, based on the salinity of seawater, I turned it into an ocean. In this central sea, I released a massive amount of bug tribe spores and accelerated their cell division 10,000 times. For every day that passed in reality, 10,000 years went by in the sandbox. But even so, it wasn't until the 5th day that these single-celled organisms began to evolve, creating a few plankton, visible to the naked eye. The central sea became murky, so I quickly set a genetic limit to restrict the size of these spore creatures. I couldn't let them evolve to be too big. On the afternoon of the 6th day, after the first 5 days of the ocean, the Paleozoic era of single-celled organisms, multicellular organisms, finally appeared in the seawater. In just a few short minutes, like an ecological documentary on Fast Forward, species were constantly born and wiped out in mere seconds, then giving rise to the next generation. But when the sun set on the sandbox world, it faced its first mass extinction. 12 hours of darkness meant this place would lose sunlight for 5,000 years. Massive patches of aquatic plants withered and sank to the bottom of the sea. Under that night sky, there wasn't a single trace of life. The marine environment in my sandbox was too small, not enough to evolve new species that could adapt to the conditions. But what was in my sea were the single-celled organisms of the bug tribe, which had incredibly strong adaptability. Half an hour after the moonlight shone down, a faint blue hue appeared on the surface of the sea, teeming with plant life. It was an ant-sized, leaf-shaped blue plant. Unexpectedly, after losing direct sunlight, this plant shifted its photosynthesis source to the moon. I was absolutely amazed. I named this plant blue silvergrass. After successfully surviving the first mass extinction, this plant began to multiply rapidly in just a few short seconds. The blue silvergrass frantically adapted to the nocturnal environment, absorbing the moonlight from the sky on a massive scale. Another hour passed. After tens of thousands of generations of species evolution, it began to form all sorts of branches, even developing into 2 new subspecies. One part of the blue silvergrass continued to absorb moonlight, enhancing its conversion efficiency. The other part turned carnivorous, relying on moonlight absorption to emit a faint fluorescent glow, attracting other blue silvergrass to swim over and then devouring them. Watching this, I couldn't help but marvel at the resilience and miracle of life. This sole surviving aquatic plant managed to develop its own diversified ecosystem right in the heart of the dark night sea. A thought suddenly struck me to record all of this. So, I hurriedly found a black notebook, flipped to the first page of Genesis, and wrote down, "The dark rain era, the world mutated, the sun set, the moon rose, and the world plunged into a long darkness for 5,000 years. 99% of marine life went extinct. Only the blue silvergrass survived. In this dark sea, the blue silvergrass became the overlord, pioneering an entire ocean." I looked at the pond that had become a sea of life, silently anticipating what marine animals would come next. What kind of marine animals would my bug tribe eventually evolve into? I stayed up all night waiting until dawn. But when the 7th day finally began, the blue silvergrass, which had thrived in the night and grown accustomed to the gentle moonlight, sank to the bottom of the sea as if they were being scorched. In this dire situation, the blue silvergrass began to die out on a massive scale. By late afternoon, another patch of blue gradually regained vitality from among the withered population. It was a branch of blue-silver grass shaped like a five-pointed star. It had successfully undergone its own mutation, and then, to adapt to the harsh sunlight in just a few short minutes, the species of blue-silver grass died off, then was reborn for countless generations, eventually forming a patch of dark blue, star-shaped seagrass. Filled with emotion, I named this species purple omen grass. Flipping to the second page of the notebook, I continued writing. The Golden Rain Era. The world mutated. The moon set. The sun rose. The scorching sun hung high for 5,000 long years. Once the overlord that survived the Dark Rain Era, the blue-silver grass has now gone extinct on a massive scale. Among them, a weaker branch, the purple omen grass, rose up strongly, becoming the main character dominating this era. As the night of the seventh day fell, the purple omen grass lived peacefully in the sea, able to endure the changes of 5,000 years of alternating sun and moon. At the same time, the photosynthesis of a massive amount of aquatic plants significantly increased the oxygen levels in the seawater. The suitable conditions for the birth of marine animals were ripe. The single-celled organisms in the sea began to evolve. The first thing to appear was a group of creatures shaped like black beetles. From then on, marine animals stepped onto the historical stage of the evolutionary era. The moment I saw animals appear, I finally revealed a satisfied smile. Dragging my exhausted body, after staying up for a day and a night, I returned to my room and went straight to sleep. When I woke up, it was already the 8th day. I discovered that vertebrates had been born. Crawling out of the ocean, they would dominate a long, drawn-out era. After writing these lines, I quietly closed the black notebook. Although these spores were about to evolve into terrestrial creatures, who knew how long it would take for them to evolve into intelligent beings? So, a thought flashed through my mind. I planned to drip my own blood into it, but this idea was truly too bold. To be cautious, I chose another type of gene to experiment with first. I went out to the zoo, and under the guise of a university research project, I bought a sample of chimpanzee blood. By the time I returned, that entire 100-acre micro-sandbox had turned into a miniature ecological world. The mountains were lush and green, the plains were covered with bizarre-looking trees, and there were animals swimming in the rivers. I stepped into this massive 100-acre experimental field and finally selected a creature shaped like a beetle. I released them into a brand new experimental field that was merely 1 square meter in size. After injecting the fresh chimpanzee blood, I accelerated time. As time passed, the blood rejection reaction caused all the creatures to die. In just 2 days, hundreds of thousands of the pets I selected had died. From the surviving population, I picked out a small group with the most successful blood fusion and named them Bugmen. The appearance of the Bugmen was incredibly similar to humans, but the difference was that they grew a round, black armored shell on their backs. The Bugmen had consumed exactly 2 days in the 100-acre sandbox in the orchard, which was equivalent to 20,000 years passing. Some powerful creatures appeared, trees towered into the sky, and a massive number of giant species were born. The sandbox had entered a harsh and terrifying Jurassic era. Among them, the largest was a quadruped beast with a black plate on its head, which had reached the body size limit set. The size of a cat. I took the newly experimented Bugman mutants and released them into a large canyon surrounded by green trees in the southern part of the sandbox. I wanted to see how, in an era like this, the Bugmen would survive. At the same time, I slowed down the time in the sandbox. The next day, I hurriedly ran straight to the sandbox to observe the Bugmen. To my great surprise and joy, they had developed a primitive tribal gathering structure and even birthed a rudimentary language and culture. But what worried me was that they were truly too weak. They simply couldn't fight against the giant beasts. I couldn't just stand by and watch the Bugmen species, which I had worked so hard to create, go extinct. So I decided to give them a little spark of civilization. I went online and ordered a miniature guest greeting pine bonsai and custom ordered an exquisitely crafted alloy greatsword. By the time these 2 items were delivered, a day and a half had passed. For the Bugmen, that was 150 years. By now, the Bugmen tribe in the sandbox had become increasingly sparse, almost on the verge of extinction. I, on the other hand, was actually a little glad about this. In an era like this, holding on for 150 years without going extinct was impressive. So after returning the time to reality, I stepped directly into the sandbox. At this moment, the Bugman tribe was nothing but ruined walls with corpses scattered everywhere. "Run away! We can't hide here anymore. Grab those male Bugmen and bring them here," he growled softly, ordering the women and children behind him to retreat. Meanwhile, he gripped a beastbone club and charged straight at the pitch-black giant beasts ahead. These giant beasts were called Dark Claws. "We have to survive." The women and young Bugmen ran for their lives along the way. They seemed all too used to this kind of fleeing. As for the male Bugmen who had charged forward earlier, they had now become food for the Dark Claws. Seeing this scene from afar, I couldn't bear it. The casualties of the Bugman tribe were too tragic. And with my long strides, the fleeing Bugmen could only feel the ground shaking. Countless wild beasts flew up in panic, and large herds of creatures fled outward. Mountains were trampled and leveled. Some powerful species didn't even have time to react. Before being crushed to death by a foot descending from the sky, taking quick strides, I caught up with the fleeing Bugmen. The Dark Claws that were just tearing the Bugmen apart were also casually stomped to death by me. Oh my god, what is this? How can there be a creature this massive in the world? He's even bigger than the largest 100-meter giant beast, Fenba, and he crushed those terrifying Dark Claws with just one stomp. The Bugmen turned their heads to look back, only to see a towering creature piercing straight through the clouds like an ancient god breaking through the white sky. They let out shrill screams, their bodies going completely limp. I could understand the language of these Bugmen, and I didn't mind their terror in the slightest. To them, I was no different from a god. "Run, run quickly. We can't escape. We're only as big as a single hair on his body." Countless fleeing Bugmen suddenly went limp and collapsed to the ground. However, a stubborn young Bugman raised his head to look at the sky and shouted at me, "You giant beast! Are you here to eat us too? You guys killed my father and mother. You even killed Dashiong. Why are we so weak?" I was a bit surprised by this bravery. So, my heart stirred. "Then I'll choose you." I gently reached out my hand and lifted the Bugman up into my palm. The Bugman's mind instantly went blank. The hand of this magnificent creature was like a vast, boundless continent, while he was merely the size of a fingerprint line on that smooth hand. He looked up again. The pupils of the 10,000-foot giant were like two blazing suns in the sky. Because I had concealed my face from the creatures in the sandbox, they could only see a blurry visage. I held this tiny Bugman in one hand, my eyes calm, looking somewhat like I was admiring a delicacy. "Do you want to change all of this?" This young Bugman suddenly trembled violently. Standing on my palm, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "You can communicate. There actually exists an intelligent 10,000-foot giant in this world. Why did you call me Wang Jie?" I supported him with my palm, bringing him level with my eyes, and calmly replied, "Naming is one of the manifestations of intelligence." Wang Jie, standing on my palm, suddenly became agitated. "We can both communicate. We are both intelligent beings. Then why won't you save us? You're clearly so powerful." The Bugmen had no idea what kind of existence I was. They just thought I was an intelligent creature similar to the giant beasts. I had no intention of explaining this to them. I held Wang Jie in my palm and took long strides across the mountains and rivers. Massive swaths of trees and creatures were trampled flat. I forced this weak Bugman in my palm to look down, my voice echoing across the entire sky. "Look at this world. Every species is equal. You and every type of plant and animal are all the same. Why should I save only you? Is it just because you possess intelligence?" Wang Jie was momentarily speechless. Then he began to scream in despair. "Then why did you even come looking for us? Don't hold on to the false hope that someone will come to save you. Only you can save yourselves. But I can impart the knowledge of civilization to you so that you can save yourselves." Wang Jie stood on my palm, looking down in absolute awe. For the first time, he stood above the clouds, taking in the vast land in its entirety. Mountains and rivers shrank beneath his gaze. Countless beasts right beneath the giant's feet were fleeing and roaring, creating an incredibly magnificent and awe-inspiring scene. What a breathtakingly beautiful view from above this truly was. What a terrifying yet desirable power this truly was. So, he opened his mouth and asked, "Civilization? What exactly is it?" I had never thought I'd have to explain the concept of civilization to this young race. I gave him my own answer. Civilization is a spark, it is knowledge, and it is wisdom. Even more so, it is the immense power found within wisdom, used to protect oneself. Wang Jie became somewhat entranced. I then placed him on my shoulder After that, I took the miniature guest greeting pine bonsai and planted it into the ground below. This pine tree was only 60 centimeters tall, but to this microscopic land, it was a towering divine tree with no end in sight. Mist swirled around its massive winding canopy, its peak nowhere to be seen. If you want the power of civilization, then show your bravery. Climb the divine tree. This is the trial I give you. As I spoke, I placed the custom-made metal greatsword and a match soaked in kerosene. After a moment of thought, I also placed a small vial containing bare genes at the top of the tree. This was a byproduct of the experiment that created the Bugmen. These are the three treasures of civilization. The first item, the Sword of Judgment. It is the weapon to protect civilization. Unlike the savages, roaming all over the earth, any race that can harness the power of tools is worthy of being called an intelligent race. The second item, the torch, it burns with blazing hot flames. Grasping the spark of fire is the enlightenment of civilization. The third item, giant bear blood. Only the bravest warriors in this world can consume it. Survive the baptism of the giant bear blood, and you will gain unparalleled, invincible strength. Fail to survive, and you will die. If you want to change the fate of your bug tribe, then climb the divine tree. Retrieve the three treasures of civilization before the torch burns out. After speaking, I gently placed this tiny bug man down on the ground. Then, leaving him in absolute shock, I took long strides and left. The moment I stepped out of the orchard, I immediately adjusted the time speed in the sandbox, making it 100 times faster. This way, a match that would normally burn for a few short seconds would, to the creatures in the sandbox, burn brightly for several long days. Right after, I used a telescope and clearly saw the scene beneath the divine tree. That tiny Wang Ji, with a look of sheer determination, was climbing the divine tree. In my eyes, this bugman climbed so fast that his movements were nothing but a blur. In just a few short seconds, he fell countless times, then risked his life to climb up again. After more than 10 seconds, he finally succeeded in reaching the top of the divine tree. But in reality, for Wang Jie inside the sandbox, he couldn't even remember how long he had been climbing or how many times he had failed. At the top of the divine tree, standing on the lush, green canopy, Wang Jie raised the sword high, seemingly saying something. Then, he quickly turned into a blur and slid down from the divine tree. I was a bit curious, so I used my creator powers to recreate the scene at the top of the divine tree just now. I saw Wang Ji conquering the divine tree, raising the sword of judgment high and swinging it over his head. He stood up high, looking over the landscape of all living things beneath the divine tree. The armor on his back was pitch black and shiny, his resolute face filled with confidence. We possess the same intelligence in the future. We will be just like that wise behemoth. Every tribesman will have magnificent, divine power. We will all have the might to make countless giant beasts scatter in fear. I will definitely lead my people to stand at the pinnacle. I will let the spark of civilization be sown across this entire land. The top of the divine tree in the ancient era. This moment was recorded and became eternal. Thousands of years later, on this land, there once existed the incredibly prosperous, yet fleetingly ephemeral, most ancient Yanli dynasty. Through archaeology, people discovered the Yanli historical hymn composed by the ancestors for their great king. This most ancient historical text, the Book of Genesis, recorded in the annals of antiquity, the wise behemoth, 10,000 feet tall, with a divine face, came trampling over the earth, mountains, and rivers. He bestowed the divine tree, established the trial of wisdom, and granted the three treasures of civilization, giving them to the young hero, King Jai, Wang Jai. When I woke up early on the morning of the second day, the sandbox world in the orchard had gone through 100 long years. For the bugmen, whose average lifespan was only 40 to 50 years, 2 generations had already passed. I was a bit expectant. After 2 generations, had that naive bugman from back then? The answer was absolutely not. He gave me an incredibly huge surprise. In the first 10 years after I left, Wang Ji led the bugmen to continue fleeing. Fire could cook food, could drive away giant beasts at night, and could bring warmth on freezing nights. No wonder the wise behemoth said that. Fire represented the origin of civilization. As for that sword of judgment, to this primeval forest, it was an invincible weapon. Relying on that sharp weapon, Wang Ji slaughtered countless ferocious beasts, allowing his tribesmen to survive. In the next 10 years, Wang Jie gradually shed his naivety. Entering his 30s, he became imposing and tall, becoming the strongest hunter of the Bugmen tribe, revered by the tribe as the hero king. He began the first steps of primitive farming and cultivation. He was arrogant, domineering, and looked down on everyone. The wise behemoth had handed the three treasures of civilization over to him. He knew very well that civilization was the inheritance of knowledge and history, so he boldly developed an advanced writing system to record the history of his race and improved their language. He believed himself to be the first one to pioneer the civilized world. Thus, he took the history of his own creation of civilization, dedicated hymns of praise to himself, and brazenly named it the Book of Genesis. He was arrogant, brutal, autocratic, and dictatorial. Yet he possessed immense personal charisma. He had 131 wives in the tribe bearing his children. Most of these descendants were strong and powerful, inheriting his handsome looks and intelligence. However, the average lifespan of the Bugmen was only around 30 to 40 years. By now, Wang Jie was already in his 30s. That hero king who once swung the sword of judgment, rough and magnanimous, was also welcoming his own twilight years. Inside a wooden house, built from tree trunks, the fire in the center was blazing fiercely. Wang Ji sat calmly on a large chair woven from dark claw fur, gazing at the fire and muttering to himself, "That is the fire of civilization, bestowed upon me by the wise behemoth. How can fire be so beautiful and radiant? Like dancing, fiery red flowers." Wang Ji's tall, burly body had grown old. He turned his head to look at the wall, which was lined with the skulls of giant beasts. These were the remains of the giant beasts on this land. He had lived a life glorious and brilliant enough. He had fulfilled his youthful dreams. He was satisfied. The next leader of the tribe was already destined to be his son, Wang Tuo. His abilities were no less than his own, capable of leading the entire tribe to continue their glory. Wang Jie could clearly feel his own life gradually coming to an end. Death is something no living creature can avoid. He had almost accepted his fate. Then, he quietly took out the giant bear blood from years ago, sighed, and said, "There's nothing left to worry about anymore." Back then, the wise behemoth said that only the bravest warriors in the world could consume this third treasure. Am I truly the bravest warrior in this world? Then let me see for myself. A hero in his twilight years, his cloudy eyes widened slightly. In a moment of daze, he recalled the glorious years of his entire life. He suddenly shed a tear, quietly slashed his arm, and poured the giant bear blood onto the wound. Excruciating pain hit him instantly. Wang Ji thrashed about and collapsed to the ground. This hero, at the end of his life, who had experienced countless slaughters throughout his life, had never panted so violently and painfully. Finally, he overcame death and slowly stood up straight. His long hair had shed its original color, turning into a boundless silvery white. His face was youthful and flawless, like an angel's. This power! Inside the wooden house, a handsome, white-haired young man was muttering to himself, "Giant bear blood, what a truly magnificent power this is." At this moment, Wang Ji could clearly feel the power within his body endlessly surging forth. At the same time, in the tribe, Wang Jie's son, Wang Tuo, was standing up high, raising the sword of judgment high, announcing his succession to the position of leader. Wang Tuo was wise and martial, perfect in both talent and character. Compared to his tyrannical and arrogant father, he was much more like a benevolent and worthy leader. Wang Jie was also very clear about this, which was why he was willing to yield the position to him in his old age. But now, everything was different. Wang Tuo was incredibly kind and won the hearts of the people. He was deeply respectful to his father, and had never thought of usurping his father's position. Yet Wang Jie still wouldn't allow any potential threat to exist. "I have returned. The position of leader is still mine." That day, fresh blood dyed the ground red. Agonizing screams echoed throughout the Yanli tribe. The hero king, Wang Jie, the sun killer, once again stepped onto the throne of the leader. In the first 10 years after Wang Jie lived his second life, he led his people to use stone to build houses. The Bugman tribe officially entered the Stone Age to fight against the giant beasts, Wang Ji, who had gained the power of the bear, could easily uproot a century-old tree. Possessing the divine strength to move mountains and fill seas, he led his people to rebel against the giant beasts. Facing the most terrifying existence on this continent, the 100-meter giant beast Fenbai, who possessed the strongest power in the world. Fenba was the overlord of the giant beast era on this continent, and also the very creature that had previously evolved to the size limit the eye set in the sandbox. Wang Ji fought a great battle with Fenba for 3 days and 3 nights. The ground cracked open, canyons collapsed, and countless giant beasts in the ancient forest fled in panic. That day, Wang Ji, covered in blood, tightly gripping the sword of judgment in one hand, dragged the corpse of the 100-meter giant beast Fenbei back with the other. With just the strength of one arm, he was able to drag Fenba's corpse, which was comparable to a towering hill. Countless people in the tribe took pride in this. They praised his strength. This was the strongest hero king in history. He had returned. At this moment, seeing him, the people of the tribe suddenly felt as if a 1,000-pound burden had been lifted off their shoulders. In that instant, the entire tribe completely boiled over. People wept tears of joy. They understood very well that, under the leadership of this great hero king, the miserable days of wandering were officially over. They no longer had to fear the savagery of the giant beasts. A new era of civilization had begun. History is written by the victors. Wang Ji didn't record his brutal act of killing his own son. Instead, he recorded his own heroic valor in the Book of Genesis. The Yanli Dynasties. Middle History chapter recorded. Wang Ji consumed the giant bear blood, slew the legendary giant beast Fenbei, moved massive boulders to surround the area, and built the first city-state. In history, Lieshi City. Time continued to pass endlessly. No longer satisfied with ruling over just one continent, Wang Ji began to pour all his efforts into developing civilization. He devoted himself to ruling the country wisely, yet he was incredibly brutal, aggressive, and looked down on everyone. He had currency minted, perfected the language, built cities, but also ruthlessly divided the bug tribe into various social classes. He squandered wealth and resources, sending out a large number of warriors to explore the boundaries of the world. He was both the great hero, king of the people, and a bona fide tyrant. In the 87th year of the Yanli dynasty, Wang Jie was 127 years old. Lishi City had reached a terrifying population of over 10 million. Countless slaves were bought and sold here. They even built an arena, which the nobles treated as entertainment. The people of the tribe from back then had all passed away. Hundreds of years flew by and the descendants could no longer remember the suffering and struggles of their ancestors. In their comfort and luxury, they were gradually becoming corrupt. However, the Yanli king of yesteryear remained as heroic and majestic as ever. Inside the gloomy Lishi King Palace, a handsome, striking man stood calmly before an exquisite white bone throne. By his hand was the legendary sword that never left his side, the Sword of Judgment. Great King of Yanli, Lord of the City-States, Your Majesty Wang Jie, we have explored the entirety of the continent. The palace minister, the star god envoy, Han Ming, bowed slightly, respectfully, and passionately recounting what he had seen and heard over the years. What exactly does our world look like? Wang Ji stared intently at the minister before him, his gaze sharp, as if it could pierce through the deep blue sky outside the palace. Those warriors who explored the world before set out in all directions, spending decades, suffering countless casualties along the way. Finally, today, we know the shape of the entire world. Han Ming respectfully used exaggerated strokes to sketch out our world. The sky is round, the earth is square. The sky is a boundless sea of high clouds. The ground is a perfect square. In the center is a vast ocean, surrounded by mountain ranges and rivers. On this vast, boundless continent, riding the fastest flying bird, in a straight line, to return from the edges of the world at both ends, would take more than 20 years. Wang Jie sat on the throne, silent for a long time. Then he finally said, "Very well, you may leave, as you command, Your Majesty." Han Ming stood up to leave, suddenly stopped, and turned his head to look reverently at the king one more time. This great hero king had led them out of the caves, pioneered the tribe, and brought them from the agricultural era into the Stone Age and then into the city-state era. He had personally slain the king of the most terrifying giant beasts, Fen Ba, leading them through one era of civilization after another. Over 30 years ago, Han Ming was still a young, wandering knight recruited by His Majesty into the palace, ordered to draw a geographical map of the city-states. It wasn't until 30 years later, when he returned to Leshi King City to complete his mission, that he was no longer the youth from back then. He was now a trembling old man with cloudy eyes who didn't have much longer to live. Yet, His Majesty remained exactly the same as before. There wasn't a single trace of time left on him. What a truly great monarch this was! Han Ming's entire body trembled, his eyes filled with fanaticism. For over 100 years, His Majesty had not displayed his power. Who knew how terrifyingly strong he had become by now? Perhaps, in the future, this immortal, ageless king would lead the people of Yanli into the next era of civilization. Our world has a round sky and a square earth. It wasn't until the entire palace was empty that Wang Jie recalled the sentence and let out a long sigh. He gently stroked the great sword beside him, as if caressing a lover who had accompanied him through endless years. The formidable power of the giant bear blood he had grasped, he had also completely comprehended and mastered. As for the Sword of Judgment, I've had people search all over this world, yet I still can't figure out how it was forged. Wang Jie, with a look of profound awe, stroked the blade. What exactly is this material? Which giant beast's bone is this, or is it the technology of some other civilization? It was truly a pity. This world, after all, wasn't a real world. I hadn't buried any kind of ore in the sandbox, so the civilization in the sandbox could only be forever stuck in the Stone Age. In their understanding of the world, the word metal would never exist. To this world, this sparkling, incredibly hard, indestructible material was mysterious, powerful, and unique. We've searched to the ends of the world, yet we still can't find that great, wise behemoth from back then. Where on earth is he living? The civilization that the wise behemoth possesses is truly beyond imagination. He gifted me this Sword of Judgment. Although it made me feel like I had found the ultimate treasure, ultimately, this holy sword that pioneered an entire civilization, isn't it also a warning to me? This power, called civilization, I've only grasped a fraction of it. The rest is entirely an unknown. Just like the secret of how this sword was forged, it makes me feel incredibly terrified. This sword is like a blade, hanging right over my head. The tip of the sword hangs high above my head, ready to fall and take my life at any moment. That power of civilization, it truly makes one yearn for it. Wang Jie sat on the throne, like a male lion that had been sleeping for a long time. His eyes slowly gazed into the distance. In that moment, he recalled the years from over 100 years ago. That massive, magnificent figure from back then. The colossal giant, 10,000 feet tall. His entire body radiating brilliant light, inherently divine. That broad hand lifting his childhood self, looking down over the mountains, rivers, and the world, handing him the three treasures of civilization. This was a scene he could hardly forget for his entire life, as if it were just yesterday. Unfortunately, my life is once again coming to an end. The giant bear blood is no longer of any use to me. I want to live a third life. Oh, great wise behemoth, I want to see you one more time. But it was truly a pity. At this very moment, I was chatting and eating with the girl next door, completely oblivious to Wang Jie's pleas. Of course, even if I had heard him, I would have ignored him. No one can live forever. Wang Jie had lived a legendary life that even I felt envious of, admired by millions. What else was there to regret? But in the end, I had underestimated Wang Jie's desire to survive. After experiencing the fear of near death and being resurrected once, he had become utterly terrified of dying. This hero king wanted to live a third life. In the 102nd year of the Yanli dynasty, Wang Jie was 142 years old. This legendary king had gained a lifespan 3 times that of ordinary people, yet his appearance began to age. He was absolutely terrified and flew into a thunderous rage, directly issuing an order to use the power of the entire nation to search for the wise behemoth, while simultaneously summoning all the strange and talented individuals in the world to concoct elixirs. For a period of time, countless giant beasts in the primeval forest were slaughtered, and all sorts of body parts were used for experiments. The Dark Claws, which had once been extremely prosperous, were even driven to the brink of extinction because of this. History had entered the city-state era, a notorious tyranny. 13 years later, a dark sorcerer in the royal court managed to concoct a longevity potion, successfully extending Wang Jia's life. But very soon after, drug resistance developed. Wang Ji once again gradually headed toward an unstoppable decline. Death is something no living creature can avoid. No matter how great a hero one is, it's impossible. Over 30 more years passed. Wang Ji felt his life slipping away. That burly old man sat motionless on the throne, closed his eyes, and muttered to himself, "My life is about to come to an end. My life has been so glorious, yet I don't want to die at all." After sitting in meditation for 3 days, he finally opened his old eyes, choosing to yield to the passage of time, and began screening candidates for the next king. In an instant, the entire dynasty was in an uproar. The great king was about to pass away. The hero king, immortal and ageless, Wang Jie, was actually reaching the end of his life, but for a moment, no one dared to speak up. The last time Wang Ji reached old age, he let his most trusted son, Wang Tuo, become the next leader, but after living a second life, he killed him with his own hands. Everyone was terrified of becoming the next Wang Tuo. However, Wang Ji was truly worthy of being the smartest king. He directly ordered, "Those who run for the throne will receive the giant bear blood. Possessing power equal to mine, you will no longer have to fear me, and furthermore, you will have the right to lead your subordinates outside to build the second King City." Bestowing the giant bear blood and allowing the construction of cities, as soon as the news spread, the entire country was shaken. Countless merchants, slaves, commoners, and nobles swarmed to the front of the royal palace. In the end, countless people, even if they passed the trial, all died from the rejection of the giant bear blood. Only the deep forest warrior Li Qi and the steppe barbarian general Long Da received the giant bear blood and survived. Each of them built their own city-state. 2 great kings possessing the giant bear blood had appeared. They were about to change the royal power, replacing the dying Wang Jie and leading the next generation of the Yanli civilization. Civilization started in Wang Jia's hands, but it couldn't be allowed to end in his hands. In the 175th year of the Yanli dynasty, the 2 kings co-ruled the world. The city-states entered an unprecedented era of prosperity. At this time, Wang Ji suddenly felt that death had completely descended upon him. He began his final struggle, summoning craftsmen, to build a wise behemoth temple even more exquisite than the Lishi King Palace. Inside the massive stone temple, a towering, magnificent giant statue was placed there in radiant glory. The towering giant held the young hero king in one hand, his lazy gaze looking down, overlooking the entire earth. His entire body emitted an astonishing white, divine aura. On that day, Wang Ji led his ministers, led all millions of his people, the entire nation, to bow down and worship the wise behemoth, hoping that the great Lord of Wisdom could sense his sincerity. If only, before his death, he could see the wise behemoth one more time. Wang Ji's aged face was indeed covered in tears, separated by nearly 100 years. "Oh, great wise behemoth, this Wang Jie wishes to see you one more time." The devotion of this hero king was solely in the hope of seeing once again the mysterious wise behemoth from years ago who had bestowed upon him the 3 treasures of civilization, because the commotion was truly too massive. While I was taking a walk with the girl next door, I suddenly received the news transmitted from the creator's mind. I felt a bit emotional, but still decided to go meet this old friend, and I should also put a stop to the Bugmen tribe. I hadn't expected that. After accelerating the time in the sandbox for just a few short days, they had destroyed countless ecosystems in the sandbox, causing a massive number of species to go extinct. And all of this was merely to serve Wang Jie's dream of immortality. I returned the time speed in the sandbox to normal. Then, taking long strides, I stepped into the sandbox world. At this moment, to the creatures in the sandbox, the ground was trembling slightly. Mountains, rivers, land, and sea, everything seemed to be shaking. Trees were trampled, valleys bore the imprints of giant footsteps, and countless beasts in the dense forest fled in panic. Gradually, the entire Lishi King city also began to vibrate slightly. What's going on? Is the city about to collapse? At this moment, Wang Jie, who was leading his ministers in worshipping the stone statue of wisdom, suddenly seemed to sense something. The aged face of this great hero king revealed for the first time a look of joy like that of a child. separated for 200 years, the great wisdom that I met in my childhood, the one who bestowed upon me the three treasures. Of civilization-wise behemoth, you have finally returned. I looked at the place that could accommodate over 10 million people, the massive Lishi city, slightly surprised. Although in my eyes, it was nothing more than a city the size of a basketball court. Nevertheless, it was built by these tiny bugmen. I looked down from above at the exquisite altars and temples in the city. Beneath the towering statue, the elderly hero king with his silvery white hair was looking up at the sky, holding the sword of judgment in his hand, tears glistening as they streamed down his face, looking towards me. Looking at this tearful, white-haired old man, I felt a bit of sorrow and pity, the one I had once held gently in my palm, the one who had once stood at the top of the great tree, holding the sword of judgment high against the sky. That passionate youth had reached the end of his years, but his youthful appearance, full of grand ambitions, felt as if it were just yesterday. Wang Ji, have you lived well these past years? I spoke softly, my voice piercing through the vast clouds and falling upon the prosperous Lishi King city below. Wang Jie leaned on his holy sword, his entire body trembling. I've lived decently. His throat was dry and hoarse as he looked up at the sky. This towering giant, even though it wasn't their first time meeting, he was still shaken by this magnificent sight. The 10,000-foot giant stood straight, piercing through the clouds, his body seemingly holding up the entire heaven and earth, radiating brilliant light. A brilliant, intense light obscured the face within the clouds, revealing a divine, pure white glow. It made it impossible to see clearly. The giant's majesty looked down upon all of Lishi City, both grand and solemnly divine. No words on earth could describe such a breathtaking sight. Oh my God, it actually exists. The entire city, with its population of over 10 million, whether they were merchants dressed in fine silks or slaves in ragged clothes, all the common folk and artisans dropped whatever they were doing. They stepped out of their homes, stood in the streets, and gazed at the immense giant that seemed to pierce the very heavens. Is this the legendary wise beast that gifted us civilization? It's actually a colossal giant, 10,000 jang tall. What a magnificent life form, rivaling the sun, moon, and stars in the sky. Everyone was lost in a state of shock. Their minds went blank. Amidst the shock, countless complex emotions intertwined, ultimately transforming into an unparalleled sense of awe. Wang Jie looked around, seeing that the great ministers in the royal palace wore the same stunned expressions. He remained silent. He remembered that year when he first saw the wise beast. This exact feeling of utter terror, he fell silent. After a long pause, Wang Jie looked up, his eyes filled with longing. Oh, wise beast, over 100 years ago, you bestowed upon me the legacy of civilization. I have succeeded. From 10,000 meters in the air, a voice that seemed to cross the vast river of time from antiquity pierced through the clouds and fell upon the Lishi royal city below. Your great deeds will be recorded in the Epic of Genesis, which you yourself commissioned. You will be the first hero king, the greatest in the history of the Yanli civilization. Your glory will last for 1,000 years after your death. You will live forever in the heroic sagas passed down through generations. That's not what I want. Wang Ji suddenly became agitated. Then what do you want? Do you wish for eternal life, like me? Wang Ji looked up at the towering giant in the sky, his face full of desire. I am willing to abandon everything, to trade everything. Please grant me the treasure of eternal life. Hearing this, I fell silent. This monarch, at this very moment, had already obtained nearly everything in the world. Glory, power, wealth, even the world itself belonged to him. And yet, he was still not satisfied. He still wanted immortality. I want that too. I am now gravely ill. I am so envious of Wang Jie's magnificent life. It's like a heroic epic. Wang Ji, you are truly too greedy. The treasure of eternal life I do not possess. I calmly looked at the aging king. Birth, old age, sickness, and death for all living things is the law of nature. At the end of one's life, who doesn't yearn to keep living? Status and position, at that moment, are all stripped away. Whether an emperor or an ant, in the end, none can escape a grave of yellow earth. I looked deeply at Wang Ji, my heart filled with a myriad of emotions. I looked down upon the kingdom below. Impossible, Wang Jie's voice was a hoarse growl as he looked up, staring at the divine face shrouded in clouds. You're lying to me. You can clearly do it. You obviously can. His eyes burned with a feverish intensity as he looked at me. like a towering mountain range, like a steadfast hand, that strong and sturdy body. After more than 200 long years, even he who consumed the giant bear blood is passing away. But you haven't changed at all. Time, for him, it's as if it were only yesterday. In his eyes, the wise beast was immortal. What kind of immense power was this? What an enviable long life! Wang Jie's lips trembled. He suddenly threw his head back and roared, "So you came here in response to my summons? Did you come just to watch me die, a lowly and pitiful life form, trembling as it withers away? Wang Jie, I came to see you off. I do not have the power to extend your life. I also came to issue a warning to your civilization." I let out a sigh. "Your civilization is far too cruel, exterminating the living creatures around you, destroying the ancient forests. The continent has been trampled by you. True civilization is not savage brutality. I demand that you stop the slaughter." Stop the slaughter? Wang Jie, though old, was still strong. He suddenly trembled and stood up straight. A fire seemed to ignite in his eyes, growing stronger and stronger. This old man with snow-white hair suddenly took a powerful step forward. "The killing cannot be stopped, and my steps cannot be halted either. Do you know? For all these years, this sword of judgment you gave me has always been hanging right over my head. It gave me great power, but it also brought me an unparalleled fear. And today, I will pull down that sword hanging over my head with my own hands. Where is the court historian?" The historian who compiled Genesis, Wen Sheng, stepped forward. "Record the history of our civilization at this very moment. I will speak, you will write." The historian, Bai Ming, silently lifted his quill pen and unrolled a gray scroll of animal hide. "Your Majesty, please speak. The history of mankind's struggle against nature is a history of courage and praise. My original purpose in ordering the compilation of Genesis was to leave a history for future generations. So now, let history record my courage at this moment. Let future generations understand the courage of their ancestors who defied nature." Wang Jie let out a heavy, ragged breath. His aged body leaned on the sword of judgment as he smiled faintly. Then he spoke in a loud voice. "In the 175th year of the Yanli dynasty, after slaying the legendary beast, the strongest in history, Fen Ba, the hero who has reigned as king for over 100 years, Wang Jie once again takes action. Harnessing the power of the entire nation, he has lured the wise beast from on high to reveal itself. He vows to raise his sword against it, to bring down the wise beast." I just watched all of this unfold in silence. My heart was a mix of complexity and astonishment. Last time, he killed his son. This time, he wants to kill a god? But I quickly calmed down. Wang Jie's actions, on the surface, seemed audacious, but in reality, it was only to be expected. The first time he was near death, this hero king, after being revived, killed his most beloved son with his own hands. The second time he faced death, he chose to raise his sword against me. Perhaps I should have realized it from the beginning, when I, among a crowd of trembling insectoids, chose the one fledgling who dared to roar and question a 10,000 jang tall giant. What else could that mean? He has never known fear in his entire life, so today is no different. This is his nature. My expression remained calm. "Wang Jie, I am warning you, one last time. This is barbarism, not civilization. Your next action will come at a terrible price. No price is heavier than death." Wang Jie slowly opened his crimson eyes. It was as if he had returned to his youth, revealing a wild, passionate fervor not seen in years. "Just as I faced certain death that year, to slay Fen Ba, so today, I will slay the wise beast. I will seize his civilization. I will take his power. And I will achieve true immortality. I must lead my people to challenge the gods." Wang Jie let out a fierce roar. This is the first time a civilization has clashed with another civilization. A civilization of wisdom, challenging another, unique wise beast. "Even though you once guided our civilization, you now stand in the way of our progress." He raised his long sword high. The wind whipped his chaotic, snow-white hair. And at that very moment, a long, resounding bell echoed throughout the entire royal city. The whole of Lishi, royal city, erupted in that instant. An army of tens of thousands surged forth like a tide, forming dense and orderly battle formations. I looked at the scene and let out a sigh. So, for more than 15 years, Wang Jie had been preparing to make a move against the wise beast. If I didn't meet his conditions, he would lead his people to kill me, cunning and courageous. From that perspective, he truly is a great tyrant. At the same time, in the giant city on the distant plains, the grassland barbarian general, Lang Da, stood calmly before the palace. Even from such a great distance, he could still see the giant that towered into the clouds. Lang Da was still in shock, his pupils constricting slightly. The time has come to act. If not for the need to find an ally with the tyrannical and arrogant nature of His Majesty Wang Jie, how could he possibly have given the precious giant bear blood to an outsider? From the very beginning, he was preparing for this moment. Lang Da forcefully drew his longsword, revealing the fierce spirit of the grassland barbarians. He raised his voice and shouted, "March out! History will remember this great moment. In the 175th year of the Yanli dynasty, the people of Yanli will slay the wise beast and return with the blood of eternal life." Meanwhile, on the divine tree near the royal capital, the divine tree that once pierced the very clouds, one of the three treasures of civilization, that sky-reaching ancient tree, was now the site of a prosperous giant city in the forest canopy. At the top of the divine tree, the deep forest warrior, Li Qi, quietly gazed into the distance, at the terrifying giant that pierced the clouds. Several disciples stood by silently. "We should set out. We made a promise to the king. We should honor it." "No. Our forest city of Li Qi chooses to do nothing." Li Qi sighed. He said that even from such a great distance, the terrifying giant's presence was enough to suffocate him. "Master, are you afraid?" One of his straightforward disciples couldn't help but ask. "The three most powerful kings of Yanli are joining forces. Even if it's the legendary wise beast, it's not certain we can't win." "I am not afraid. I do not fear death. I am afraid of losing something more important than life, our civilization and wisdom. They prevent me from slaughtering like a savage beast, the wise beast who gifted us civilization, who saved our race. Without gratitude and righteousness, how are we any different from wild beasts?" The disciples fell silent. Their master was the great hero of the deep forest, who had taken the giant bear blood and survived, and now he was choosing to defy a royal decree. "I defy the order and will not join the battle. This is an unforgivable crime. Cut off my head. If His Majesty the King is victorious, then take my head to the royal palace. My crime is defying a direct order. Use my crime as His Majesty's servant to ensure the survival of the forest city. I was destined to die anyway. This was all my own decision. I beg His Majesty to spare the forest royal city, but if the wise beast wins, take my head to it. Beg for the mercy of the great giant. Let the wise beast know that we still have true inheritors of civilization, not just pure savagery. Beg him not to completely annihilate our race. Leave us a sliver of a chance to survive." Master Li Qi stood atop the divine tree, calmly, spreading his arms. He chose silence for a moment. Then, with his mind made up, a brilliant spray of fresh blood erupted. He had taken his own head. One of the strongest heroes of the Yanli civilization showed no resistance before his death. The disciple looked at the serene expression on Li Qi's severed head and quietly wrapped it in animal hide. Suddenly, his heart ached. He vaguely knew that something incredibly important in his life was slowly shattering. On the ground below, countless arrows were fired. This was the most elite army of Yanli, but to me, they were nothing more than large ants. When the swords and long spears struck my thick jeans, they didn't even touch my skin. So even the most elite army can't pierce his clothing. I should have guessed sooner. I conquered the forests. My elite army has slain countless giant beasts. And yet, before the wise beast, it's completely useless. Before the words were even finished, Wang Ji suddenly launched himself into the air. In an instant, he was before my knee. I couldn't help but be slightly impressed. So fast. Like a flea, with such terrifying speed. Truly remarkable. I swung my hand to swat him, but unexpectedly, the aged Hero King, wielding his sacred sword, deftly dodged it. Wang Jie maintained his high speed, climbing up the leg of my jeans, but his expression was incredibly grave. "So this is the wise beast?" Just a casual lift of his leg and the resulting gust of wind was almost enough to blow me away. "Your Majesty, Lang Da is here to assist the grassland barbarian general." Lang Da had also arrived. With just a slight crouch, he too could leap 7 or 8 meters into the air, climbing onto my pant leg. I reached out to grab Lang Da, Faced with a hand as vast as a mountaintop, he also dodged with extreme skill. A man who had wrestled with giant beasts for countless years, he was a veteran of 100 battles, truly worthy of the title King of the Grasslands. You two are quite impressive. But the test ends here. As I spoke, I suddenly thrust my hand forward. Lang Da's expression changed drastically. He had no time to react before he was sent flying. In the next second, with the force of a landslide, I struck directly at Wang Jie. Damn it, how could he? Wang Jie's face was filled with terror. He swung his sword in a stunningly beautiful arc, blocking in front of him as my hand collided with the blade. His entire body was thrown backward and fell rapidly. Crashing to the ground, Wang Jie let out a pained cry, spitting out a large mouthful of fresh blood, defeated in a single move. And all I could do was scratch his skin? I looked at this great man with a sigh. Although he was defeated from beginning to end, he never showed a hint of fear. He never showed a hint of fear. Even knowing the difference in our strength was like heaven and earth. Wang Jie, this complex and powerful man, had an incredibly strong personal charisma. Domineering, arrogant, and believing himself supreme. It truly made me feel a bit of pity and regret for him, but the end of his lifespan was something I truly could not change. Lang Dao at this moment also spat out a large mouthful of blood. He looked up at the giant in the sky. There was no fear in his eyes either, because from the very beginning he was prepared to die. He just let out a hollow laugh, so the gap was this great. What in the world did we declare war against? Do you have any regrets now? I sighed softly. My immense form stood tall, reaching the clouds, like a giant from ancient times, mysterious and majestic. Regret? No, this was simply a choice. Wang Jie spat out a large mouthful of blood. At this moment, the Yanli civilization declares its defeat before the wise beast. They knew exactly what this meant. A world-ending catastrophe was about to befall them. I turned my head and looked at the scattering soldiers. The ground was filled with screams. Desperate, frantic cries. We'll be destroyed. Our race will be wiped out. The insectoids wailed incessantly. They had clearly been driven mad. I never thought I would manipulate the fates of so many. Manipulate the rise and fall of a civilization. I looked down from on high at the aging hero king and spoke faintly. Are we about to face destruction? Just as we have destroyed countless species of giant beasts, will you destroy us and avenge them? I looked at him in silence, but even at this moment, he still showed no fear. I thought for a moment and said, in that case, I will destroy you. You have destroyed the ecosystem of the entire world. You have driven too many species to extinction. I cannot allow you to continue your rampage. Hearing this, Wang Jie gave a calm smile. That year, you answered my question. What is civilization? Now, could you answer a few final questions for me? Our king wants the wise beast to answer his questions. The surrounding people all held their breath, looking up at the 10,000 jang tall giant. The giant was also silent. Suddenly, a deep, profound voice pierced through the vast clouds, falling upon the Lishi royal city below. Ask your questions. In that instant, the world seemed to fall deathly silent. Countless scattering soldiers, fleeing for their lives, stopped in their tracks. They turned their heads to look at the giant in the sky. How will you destroy us? I will use water. After a moment's thought, I calmly added, I will use a great flood to wash away and submerge this entire civilization, destroying every trace you have ever left behind. In an instant, the great earth seemed to hold its breath. Everyone was as silent as a cicada in winter. This land has become too filthy, filled with sinners, so the wise beast will use a great flood. But even if the wise beast is powerful, how could it possibly unleash a flood that could cover the entire world? This is no longer the power of a giant beast. It's clearly everyone was breathing heavily. For a moment, they couldn't think of a word to describe the legendary wise beast. Second question. This world is a square earth under a round heaven. But why have your footprints never been seen? Where do you come from? What exactly is the wise beast? Why did you give us the spark of civilization? And why do you stop us from slaughtering other races? You say all living things are equal. Savage species, intelligent species, and even plants are all equal. So this land, what is it to you? I lowered my head slightly, looking at the cornered hero king before me. A vast voice entered the heart of the great earth. This land is the world I created. All are my children. Savage species, intelligent species, all species. To me, they are all my children. Therefore, you are all equal. The people on the ground all gasped heavily. Those gasps gradually spread, turning into wave after wave of ragged breaths. Wang Ji, too, in that instant, was struck with terror, his face filled with disbelief. Suddenly he began to laugh. It eventually turned into a wild, arrogant laugh. Madly, how interesting this is, truly fascinating. What in the world have we been fighting against? So the legendary wise beast was only a beast in our own minds. He is not a real beast. He is the almighty being who created all things. He is the creator who made this entire world. A being like this should be called a god. On this land, the people of the tribes had never had a concept of God, but at this moment, they did. I was once arrogant enough to name the book recording the history of my own creation of civilization Genesis. I thought I had created a world of civilization. But in reality, the true creator was the wise beast. All living things are his children. What magnificent, grand power is this? And I dared to foolishly plot. Wang Jie's voice suddenly cut off. Immediately after, his laughter shot up to the heavens. As for me, my heart was calm. I quietly watched the cornered hero king laugh. I've always had a good temper. Naturally, I could tolerate his indulgence and arrogance before his death. Final question. You created our world. How many days did it take? Wang Jie suddenly asked. This question truly made me pause and think. Back then, to turn the orchard into a sandbox, I had to dig up the earth, and I had to sculpt the mountains. This square piece of land took a full week to finish. So, I just answered honestly. I created this land in exactly 7 days. 7 days God created all things in just 7 days. Wang Ji froze. Then he burst out laughing until tears streamed down his face. In an instant, his pride and arrogance, right before his death, were utterly shattered. The greatest sorrow is a heart that has died. In a daze, he remembered his childhood, standing in a massive palm, asking this giant his first question. What is civilization? Civilization is a spark. It is knowledge, and it is the order found within wisdom, used to protect oneself. Wang Jie's laughter grew louder and louder, carrying across the cool winds, across the hillsides, across the rivers and forests. All the other insectoids, in a moment of panic, looked up. It was as if they could all hear this tragic song. Countless people shed tears, wailing in sorrow, singing an unnamed dirge for Yanli. The fall of a great king. That day, in Lishi Royal City, the great epic hero king of a generation, Wang Ji. And just like that, he reached the end of his life, becoming dust in the annals of history. I let out a sigh. I never wanted to fight for anything. What you wanted, the questions you wanted to ask, I answered them all honestly, one by one. I'm even about to die myself. We are defeated, countless insectoids were wailing, fleeing in a frenzy. I just quietly looked down on it all. Where else could those insectoids run? The edge of the world? The historian Bai Ming stood on the towering walls of Lishi Royal City, knowing the terrifying truth. He was drenched in a cold sweat. I must take this chance before I die to record everything. I must pass down the truth of the world to future generations. The historian's whole body trembled, sweat soaking his arm. Genesis, the kingdom of Yanli, records. The wise beast is in truth the creator lord. In his final years, Wang Ji, arrogant and conceited, foolishly sought to raise his sword against the Lord. In the end, he angered the celestial God. God saw that the people on earth were full of sin, and so resolved to destroy the Yanli civilization, unleashing a world-ending great flood. The sky is shaking, the earth is roaring in the tense atmosphere of the royal city. Everyone was filled with unease, trembling in fear. God will bring down punishment upon our arms and crush our spines. The great flood will destroy our world and obliterate our civilization. And at that very moment, a young man with white hair, carrying a bag, walked to my feet. He opened the bag, revealing the severed head inside. He raised his voice and said, "Greetings, great wise beast. The forest king, Li Qi, begs for your forgiveness." I paused for a moment. Of the 3 kings, only 2 came. The forest king was absent. He chose to kneel and beg, prostrating himself on the ground. We, the people of Yanli, are not only defined by barbarism. My master, Li Qi, has already proven this with his own death. He would rather defy a royal decree than raise his sword against the benefactor who gave us civilization. We are not all wicked. I beg you, when you deliver your divine punishment, Please leave the people of Yanli one final glimmer of hope." After hearing him out, I understood the Forest King's actions and let out a sigh. In truth, I never thought Wang Jai would be so insane, nor did I ever intend to completely annihilate them. It's just that they were too indulgent and self-righteous for such a foolish and insane challenge, and for their absurdity, they ultimately had to pay the price for their actions. Lead your people and use that giant divine tree to build an ark. Wait for the friendly people of Liqi's forest city to board the vessel. I will then unleash the great flood. With that, I turned and left. We are defeated, but our nation and race are not extinct. The embers of hope have been passed on. Thank the Creator for his mercy. It's all thanks to the Forest King, Li Qi, for showing our goodwill to the Lord. We still have a chance for salvation. Praise Li Qi. Praise the great Forest King. The historian Bi Ming was also overjoyed. He watched the back of the departing giant, and with a flourish of his pen, wrote in Genesis, the kingdom of Yanli. It is written that the benevolence of the Forest King, Li Qi, moved the heart of the celestial god who was preparing to destroy the world, granting the god-slaying people of Yanli a path to survival. The messenger of God ordered the chosen to build an ark. I returned to my yard, tidied up a bit, and found the high-pressure water gun that I had bought while out shopping a few days ago. I never thought it would come in handy now. While I spent a mere 10 minutes preparing the water gun, 120 days had passed in the sandbox. Countless people, moving like sped-up after-images, felled the divine tree, the potted plant that had been saved from years ago, to build a giant ark. They brought with them the seeds of all living things, the young of all kinds of giant beasts, and species from all over the world. Everything was gathered inside this giant ark. Time to start the cleansing. I stepped into the sandbox. Standing about 10 meters away, I raised the high-pressure water gun. A jet of snow-white, high-pressure water shot directly towards the civilized city-state area in the orchard. Large swaths of trees collapsed. In an instant, the giant treetops, countless beasts fled the forest, running past the sky-filling white flood. In the end, they were all submerged, a vast expanse of white. The chosen people led everyone onto the ark. They looked at the sky in shock. It was a terrifying sight. It was as if the fountains of the great deep had all burst forth and countless streams of snow-white water poured down from the clouds, washing over the great earth. Except for the ark floating on the surface of the sea, the entire world was submerged in a vast expanse of white foam. The great flood was like a magnificent white waterfall cascading down from the 10,000 jang high peak of the sky. As it surged and churned, it submerged mountains, rivers, and the great earth. In just a brief moment, the world-destroying great flood descended. On the deck of the ark, merchants, nobles, commoners, and slaves all sighed in awe. They were the most righteous. God sent the flood to cleanse this land of sin, to wash away the barbarians and the tyrants and those who bore sin. That day of the world-ending flood came to be known as the Day of Cataclysm. The last embers of the Yanli civilization, the chosen ones, led the remaining people of Yanli on the ark, fleeing the great flood. In a deserted corner of the ship, the historian Bi Ming, holding his quill pen, sat slumped on the deck, still lost in the image of that great, godlike figure. Our world is a square earth under a round heaven. Our world was created by God in just 7 days. What magnificent grand power is this? Bi Ming's hands trembled. He began to use his own imagination, quietly began to fill in the details of God's 7 days of creation. He put pen to paper and wrote down the final records of the 7 days of God's creation in Genesis. On the first day, God decreed, "Let there be light." God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. On the second day, God decreed, "Let there be an expanse between the waters." And so there was the sky. On the third day, God decreed, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And the water and dry ground were separated. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. On the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, on the seventh day, all of creation was complete. And on this day, he blessed the previous 6 days. In the days that followed, people came to accept this historian's imaginings as truth, as if the Creator God had truly, before the eyes of mortals, recounted his 7 days of his own creation. But people were more than willing to believe this story. In that story, on the 7th day, God rested. People came to call this day the Day of Rest, the Holy Day. On this day, people would also choose to stop and rest. As for me, I sprayed the water for a long time. After making sure I hadn't missed a spot, I turned off the high-pressure water gun and quietly put it back in the storage room. Doing this, I guess this counts as another complete cleaning of the sandbox. The insectoids' unrestrained slaughter, killing all other species and then destroying themselves. The Genesis main brain, beside me, spoke up. Even if you hadn't destroyed them, they would have destroyed themselves eventually. I'm not as weak as you think, and I don't need you to comfort me. I just feel a little upset, that's all.